Archenemy is a 4-player supplementary Magic the Gathering game where one player faces off against 3 others. To even out the fight, the Archenemy is aided by a deck of special scheme cards. In the recently released Archenemy Nicol Bolas, players choose to be one of 3 members of the Gatewatch in an epic battle to overthrow the tyrannical Nicol. The box set uses reasonably balanced pre-constructed decks to represent Nissa, Chandra, and Gideon in their battle. But what about the rest of the Gatewatch? Where's Jace, the face of the group? What about Liliana, or even the recently added Ajani? And that's where we come in. I present to you a new series, Archenemy Add-Ons. We'll start by visiting flavor-based decks that are reasonably consistent with those that are already in the box set, but for the missing members of the Gatewatch. So the basic criteria we've used to design these decks are that the deck should generally match the color identity of their respective planeswalker, that the deck should follow a central theme and have a power level relatively equal to the other pre-constructed decks. If you read between the lines, what we're saying here is that some consistency and raw power is sacrificed in favor of providing variety to the decks in the game. The deck list should all be less than $30, the cards in them should be accessible and relatively affordable, and the planeswalkers selected for each of the decks should be among the least expensive. Enter Liliana Vess. Though there have been 7 Liliana planeswalkers released to date, only 6 of them were actually found in booster packs. One was a planeswalker deck exclusive for the recently released Amonkhet. So among these planeswalker cards, only 3 of them can be easily found for less than $10. We don't think Deathwielder screams build around for a game setting like Archenemy, so let's take a look at the other 2. Liliana Vess would be a fine choice for a discard-oriented deck in Archenemy. Coupled with a critical mass of discard-oriented effects, she would certainly pose a threat to Nicol Bolas' evil plans. But the Gatewatch is a team, sort of, and Archenemy is a team sport. So we've chosen to put Liliana of the Dark Realms at the head of our deck. This gives Liliana a powerful removal ability as well as a deck-thinning ramp effect. And in true Liliana fashion, we'll be focusing on raising endless ranks of the dead through graveyard recursion and exile effects. We're going to start with 2 copies of Festering Mummy. This is a 1-mana 1/1, and when it dies, you can put a -1/-1 counter on target creature. This has the effect of decreasing the overall power and toughness of some of Nicol Bolas' largest creatures. For 2 drops, we're going to play 1 copy of Dragscape Zombie. 2-mana 2/1, but also has the ability Unearth. So we're able to remove the card from the graveyard, return it to the battlefield to sneak in for an attack. It's also a reasonable target for some of the exile effects we'll see later. Then we're going to play 1 copy of Rancid Rats. So Rancid Rats is able to sneak in for some extra damage early in the game, or even late in the game, but also has Death Touch, which can be critical to removing some of Nicol Bolas' largest threats. And then at 2-drop, finally, we'll play 2 Wailing Ghouls. Wailing Ghoul puts cards from Liliana's library right into the graveyard. Next, we'll play 1 copy of Crow of Dark Tidings. This gives Liliana a flyer and does the same thing as Wailing Ghouls. And then we're going to play 2 copies of Ghoul Raiser, which allows a random zombie card to be returned from the graveyard to the hand. 1 copy of Liliana's Reaver. If left unchallenged, this powerful 4-drop not only strips cards from the opponent's hand, but also puts additional creatures on, forcing more pressure. Next up is Undead Servant, which we're playing 3 copies of, consistent with some of the other Planeswalker depths in Archenemy. So when Undead Servant enters the battlefield, we get to put a 2/2 black zombie creature token onto the battlefield for each other Undead Servant in your graveyard. This is one of those cards Liliana probably wants to get into the graveyard early and often. Veilborn Ghouls, being a 5-drop, synergizes well with Liliana of the Dark Realms and her ramp ability. He is both an offensive creature and returns to the battlefield whenever a swamp is played. Finally, for creatures, we're playing 1 copy of Malfeld Twins. Though it doesn't recur, when it dies, it replaces itself with zombie creature tokens. So we're going to play 7 instants in the deck. 2 copies of Vile Rebirth, which allows to exile target creatures from a graveyard. So we can use this both to exile our own creatures if needed, or the creatures of our fellow Gatewatch members, or even if the Archenemy somehow has an ability to return creatures from the graveyard to their hand. This gives us an ability to strip them out and replaces it at a pretty good rate with a 2/2 black zombie creature token. Next up is 1 copy of Ultimate Price, straight up monocolored creature removal. Then we play 1 copy of Dark Dabbling. Dark Dabbling will help shield us from any sort of wrath effects that the Archenemy may be able to employ on the field if we're able to activate Spell Mastery, which shouldn't be difficult given the relatively low curve of our instants and sorceries and the fact that we're playing 15 total. Next up at 3 mana is 1 copy of Murder, once again, straight up creature removal. Then 2 copies of Cruel Revival. So not only does this allow Liliana to destroy a creature, it also enables her to recur zombies. For sorceries, we're playing 1 copy of Duress. Next up is 2 Ghoul Caller's Chance. This allows us to recur 2 zombies from our graveyard to our hand. Especially late in the game, this could be incredibly useful and is a very efficient use of mana. Then we're playing 2 copies of Shamble back. So similar to Vile Rebirth, we get the added benefit of also gaining 2 life along with the black zombie token. Next up at 2 mana is 2 Cemetery Recruitment. So returning a creature card from the graveyard to your hand is great. And given that all of Liliana's creatures are zombies, this will also draw you a card. And last, 1 copy of Rise from the Grave. This allows us to steal the best creature removed from the board at any one time and reanimate it. We're going to play 3 enchantments in the deck. Start with a Necromancer's Stockpile, which enables you to discard creature cards to draw a card. This means we can bin cards to the graveyard early, still draw a card to replace it, and get a zombie. Next up is Curse of the Shallow Grave. Now I'm not sure this is too powerful for Archenemy, but it's worth a shot. If we're able to successfully land this, every combat step, the Gatewatch will be putting 3 2/2 black zombie token creatures onto the battlefield. Finally, our last enchantment, Brink of Disaster. If I didn't already mention it, our Planeswalker is Liliana of the Dark Realms. Her +1 ability allows her to search her library for a swamp card and put it in her hand. This has the effect of thinning your library and makes it less likely that irrelevant cards such as lands will be forced to the graveyard. Additionally, there's a -3 which allows Liliana to remove threats from the board or buff one of our Gatewatch creatures to get in extra damage. Finally, for lands, we're playing 23 basic swamps. Pretty straightforward given Liliana's ability to draw swamps out of the library. And 2 copies of Mortuary Mire, which just provide us one other way of recurring creatures. And that, in a nutshell, is Archenemy Add-Ons Liliana Vess. Thanks for watching!